big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
Kyler Gordon gets paid. TJ Edwards gets paid. The Bears are getting more expensive. Media outlets saying a ton of things. And then the question that nobody wants to discuss, should the Bears trade out of round one? Welcome to the Halas Beat. He's Nick Whalen. I'm Usayd Koshul. You can check us out on Twitter @_Nick Whalen, @Usayd Koshul, and @Halas Beat. Nick, I don't know about you, but where do we start with this whole thing? Because there's a lot out there about Kyler Gordon in terms of, hey, Dennis Allen wants him playing another position. Some people say TJ Edwards is a Danny Trevathan 2.0 situation. And then you have the Bears getting more expensive in the process, trading out of the first round. How's it going? Where do we start with all this?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with Kyler. We talked a little bit about his contract last time, and the extension is so the numbers came out: 3 years, $40 million, 28 in new guaranteed money. His salary in 2025 goes up slightly, but basically it's a 2-year extension, y'all. Like, that's where it goes, and then you can have some outs with some dead money after that. But the interesting thing I think was Dennis Allen talking about, he could move him around to get him more snaps, which means he really values Kyler Gordon. We all love Kyler Gordon, but saying safety or a corner, safety or a corner. I was like outside corner, didn't go well his rookie year. But safety, I didn't even think about it. But then you look at some of the stuff that they're running in Minnesota with Brian Flores with 3 safety looks, and how things are unpredictable. I've never even thought of that. What do you think about Kyler Gordon as a potential safety? At least some of the snaps out there.
I mean, it makes sense, just for perspective here. So Kyler Gordon's RAS coming out of Washington was a 9.69. Okay, and that, by the way, is if you go to our Bear Report spreadsheet, I kind of did some positional breakdowns with the RAS and stuff. That's the highest that Ryan Poles has ever drafted. And so I kind of look at all this stuff and I'm like, this opens up your sort of coverage, right? You got into the argument with the guy on Twitter about how Dennis Allen doesn't necessarily want, tall, lanky edge rushers, right? So first off, this tells me that, what's happening is that Dennis Allen's ready to kind of rebuild his defense in Chicago based on the personnel that he currently has. And then the second thing is this. So you talk about, safety looks. The big thing to understand with safeties is not just one high or two high, right? We see what Brian Flores is doing in Minnesota. A lot of times the safety kind of determines what the coverage is really going to be. Because if you got coverage 0, right? There may not be a safety on the field at all. It's just straight man-to-man, okay? Then you go your one high looks, right, which allows you to kind of divide things up into the different coverage families, like cover 1 versus cover 3, okay? The Bears have the personnel to be able to play quarters coverage as well if they want to, but I really think that for a guy as athletic as he is, as Kyler Gordon is, what Dennis Allen's basically saying is we're going to move him around a ton simply because if he can help protect against the deep pass, that opens up Terrell Smith to get more opportunities. That also makes some of these safeties like Adrian Brisker a potential safety blanket for, no pun intended there, by the way, safety blanket for Tyreek Stevenson, because he constantly is always getting picked on. So it's just right now, this is a player that the Bears are going to figure out how to use.
Yeah, I'd even think inverted looks too. So even if he started in nickel, he could rotate to be the deep safety. You know what I mean? And some guys come up because that's the thing is you want that first look of what the quarterback thinks to not be the post snap look, and that's how you create turnovers and even hesitations, and the pass rush gets there and gets your sack. So. I just thought it was pretty insightful to think of utilizing a good player in a bunch of different ways. Also refreshing to get him more snaps. And then, TJ Edwards, the extension, man, 2 years, $20 million, 16.6 guaranteed, which actually I thought was only going to be one of the years guaranteed, which really makes TJ Edwards is going to be in Chicago for 3 more years. That is what it seems like. First, I'll let you start with this one. What do you think? Do you think this is Danny Trevathan 2.0, or are you okay with this extension?
See, I'm good with the extension, and the reason being is because, first off, you kind of look at where this Bears defense is at, and again, you and I have talked extensively on this show about what about if the Bears possibly take a linebacker. Now, part of me also says this, is that if the Bears, by extending TJ Edwards, maybe they're telling us, like, hey, we really don't value this linebacker class as much as maybe you and I have thought. That's number one, certainly a possibility. But number two, when you look at the state of the Bears locker room, the types of leaders you want around are these guys like a TJ Edwards. I mean, so selfless, just always kind of willing to do whatever is best for the team. He may not be the flashiest player on the field, but he's certainly one of the more underrated ones because the production is there from a tackling standpoint. I get some people like, oh, well, TJ Edwards fell off in terms of coverage last year, but like, let's be honest. I mean, every player took a step back last year with how bad the Bears were on defense, especially after Matt Eberflus got fired. And then the other big thing to look at is that he has, for the most part, remained relatively healthy. You know, a lot of people who sit here and they're like, oh, it's a Danny Trevathan situation. I don't think they realize and understand, like, Danny Trevathan had 2 season-ending injuries. And then the Bears still went ahead and rewarded him with a nice little contract just because they felt like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. To me, my concern is TJ Edwards is already not athletic, just very instinctive. I mean, coming out of college, y'all ran a 4.87 with a 32.5 broad jump 9.4 broad jump, 32.5 vertical. That's not very athletic. And then you go from that to he's going to be 29 before this season starts. That's this year. So when this extension kicks in, he'll be 30 and 31. And it looked like he was a little bit less athletic last year. At least from my eyes, right? In terms of PFF, he massively fell down a little bit. Now, again, Billings healthy, other things might help him not be as exposed and cover as much area, being, you know, his athleticism. But I just don't know that it was necessary. I mean, I get like $10 million per year over the next 2 years. Even this season, if he was made $10 million per year, he'd be like the tied for 13th most or highest paid linebacker, which isn't bad. And then, you know, when that kicks in the next 2 years, it'll be probably like 15th and 18th highest paid linebacker. Like, it's not terrible. I just don't know why'd you have to do it right now? Like, I get he's going to last year of his deal. If that takes pressure off of guys, they play better. But I just don't know why they made that decision. With Kyler, it makes sense because you think it would get more expensive. I just can't see TJ Edwards' extension getting more expensive, you know, a month, 6 months, 9 months from now versus yesterday.
I mean, it certainly is this gamble that the Bears are taking here, because I guess the way that they're viewing it is it's like, hey, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to extend TJ Edwards right now just because we don't want another linebacker similar to him to get a big deal, which, see, it's interesting because I think when we talk about the state of linebackers, like, linebackers don't get paid a hell of a lot of money, right? Just with the way the position's gone and stuff. Like, maybe during the Brian Urlacher, Ray Lewis days, if teams use linebackers in those ways, then yeah, they'd be getting paid a ton. But even now, it's just like you look at it, it's not like linebacker is this position to where Bears and teams across the league, the Bears, but also teams across the league are like saying, hey, we have to pay this guy like ASAP right now. You know, the Bears kind of did it, I think, just to get the extension out of the way.
And I mean, in terms of a leader and a pro, I think I talked about this, but like, you watch the completion to DJ Moore at Green Bay and then getting the spike down, like that sequence, you look over in the sideline, TJ Edwards is pumped and coming towards them, and like, you could tell, like, it matters to him. It's not like a paycheck. You know what I mean? Like, he's the type of guy you want in your locker room. So from that perspective, I certainly get it for sure. So here's, and we talked about this on a previous episode, but to me, I think this is more evidence kind of going in towards what Chicago could do in the draft. Okay, y'all. So paid Kyler Gordon, paid TJ Edwards, who's going to be 29 before the season starts, paid Grady Jarrett, 32-year-old, traded for Joe Tooney, 32-year-old, traded for and extended Jonah Jackson, like spent money on guys that aren't young. I don't think Jonah Jackson's like old, but the other two are old, 32. TJ Edwards is not young. Okay. And again, you say like, we're talking about like what people are projecting the Bears to draft at 10. It seems like it's Genty, Tyler Warren, Kelvin Banks. Like that seems like it's like the only three that I see now, right? My Mike Green is getting no love. But of those, man, there's only one of those that I see that might not even start this year. And that's Kelvin Banks Jr. And so to me, like, if you're making these moves for veterans, like I'm just thinking philosophically, you're making these moves for veterans. I'm thinking you're in this 2-year window of competing because after that, Grady Jarrett will be gone. Joe Tooney likely will be gone. We'll see what happens with some of the contracts of some other guys like Sweat, etc. But like these next 2 years, it's like, hey, we're kind of pushing in, and I don't know that like, hey, we're going to draft, and I've said this before, like we're going to draft like Malachi Starks or whatever. But it's like if those guys are just competing for some time, it doesn't make as much sense making these veteran moves versus drafting someone that's going to contribute right away and be a difference maker. Will make more sense to me in terms of like all of the moves that they made.
Okay, so I fully struggle with this one, and I'm going to admit, like, the tough part about having this conversation is that there's still that faction of fans. It's just like, oh, well, the Bears could go ahead and could extend Joe Tooney. I know you and I were kind of texting about that back and forth the other day. But the other thing to me that I think is so telling is it's just like, when you look at the sequence of how things have played out, so you trade for Jonah Jackson, 24 hours later, you're trading for Joe Tooney. Jonah Jackson gets the extension, Joe Tooney does not. That gets me thinking, and then it just so happens that this is a draft class where, let's call it how it is, like the quality linemen that are going to be ready to go ahead and start from day one are probably all gone within the first 45 to 50 picks, okay? So what that tells me is the Bears are kind of looking at this thing, and it's just like, hey, we are going to bank on how this board falls to possibly take a Joe Tooney replacement, sit him on the bench for a year, and then draft and develop. And obviously, to me personally, like I'm always, and I've kind of said this all off season as long as we've been doing this show, is that it's like I don't want the Bears to draft a wide receiver, for example, in round 2, and then that guy's just on the bench the entire year, right? Because that to me is a waste of a draft pick, especially when you've got two talented guys ahead of you, you're kind of looking for that third. But then when it comes to some of these positions like interior offensive line, I mean, the Bears gave up a 4th-round pick for Joe Tooney simply because they believe that next year at this time, they're possibly going to have someone on the roster that is ascending, that's ready to go ahead and take over. And plus, like, Tooney's 34, right? He's not going to play for another 10 to 15 years. He's not going to be the type of guy that is ready to go ahead and, be here for a decade. Like the Bears view him as a very short-term option, which is why I think part of the reason that this extension hasn't necessarily been done yet.
Well, he's 32. He'll turn 33 in November.
Yeah, so 33 basically. But I think the point still stands that he's a guy that, is older by NFL standards. Yeah, he's blocked for Mahomes and Brady. But then again, it just all kind of goes back to like, if the Bears were going to extend him, I do feel like an extension would have been in place when the two sides were talking about the trade. Yeah,
that makes sense. And the other thing is that, and, I like to debate on Twitter. I think it's fun just to hear perspectives and stuff. And someone, because we brought up the Ted McMillan thing, right, last episode. And that caused some waves, which is, kind of fun, whatever. But it's just like to think things I haven't thought about. Like, let's think outside the box. And someone's like, well, that's just not good in terms of team building, in terms of you've invested so much at receiver. And I'm like, well, okay, let's think O-line, right? Which is what everyone wants. Like, we have to get the left tackle, because I've talked about the PTSD before. But if you really think about it, man, they've invested a lot of money into Tooney, Dahlman, Jackson, $4 million for Bates as a backup, 1st-round pick in Darnell Wright, and now you want a 1st-round pick in the left tackle, and you got a third round pick as a backup. Like, I can't think of another O-line that's invested that much into it before. So like, it almost feels like overkill to invest another first in the O-line. But then you look at D-line. D-line's invested a ton. They just paid Dio. They just paid Grady. Second round pick in Dexter, all of the cap, and second round pick for Sweat. Like, you go through the roster, man, it's like everywhere's been pretty heavily invested. Cole Kmet got extended. Obviously Caleb with a first round pick. Like, so in terms of like roster building, I mean secondary, multiple three second round picks back there. Like, everywhere's gotten Tremaine Edmonds overpaid. Like, everywhere's gotten a lot of money or resources invested in them. So to me, like, you can make the case for anywhere that the 10th pick goes is going to be over investing in terms of a roster building standpoint. Does that make sense?
It does. So this idea of over investing is an interesting one, right? And you kind of start to look at where the Bears are with their quote unquote over investments. I mean, first off, you want to have a position group that is 2, 3, 4 guys deep. Okay. Even though the fourth guy may be someone that is, 31, 32, 33 years old and is a gunner on special teams, but knows and understands your offensive and defensive system to a point where he can kind of slide and play wherever. So you want to have a roster that is 2, 3, 4 guys deep at every single position. The other big thing is that I examine this roster and I'm also just like, well, there is still room for improvement because it's not like Braxton Jones is guaranteed the starting job in 2025. Then you start to kind of look at, well, maybe the Bears do take a left tackle at 10th overall. But the other part of me is just like, hey, maybe Dan Ruchar, who had some stuff to say today about the Bears organization, as well as the O-line, he believes in building inside to outside. Maybe he looks at this whole thing, goes to his bosses, and is just like, yeah, O-line's good, but this is what this offensive line can do with a guy like Will Campbell. This is what this offensive line can do with a guy like Ramon Membu. But the other part of the whole situation I think the Bears have to certainly look at is, what are you going to do when it comes to the defensive side of the ball? Because to me, honestly, this defense isn't a finished product. I would like to see some additional linebacker depth. The Bears are getting more expensive, and I think that's part of what makes hitting on at least 4 of these 7 draft picks so important, is that you're never going to have the perfect roster, but as you continue to hand out money to guys like Edwards and Kyler Gordon, and then there's a chance you pay Jaquan Brisker next offseason, that you, or even Braxton Jones, because we don't know how the season's going to go, that all of a sudden you want to have some of these younger guys ready to go, because maybe the Bears write it out with Braxton Jones, but then also draft a tackle and just draft and develop a guy for a year that's not a first-round pick to eventually have him take over as soon as 2026.
Yeah, no, certainly could be. Or that guy could be Karan Amagaji, who today, this is what Dan Richard said about him. He said, I don't think it's fair to evaluate on anything that he did last year since he missed training camp. I'm excited about where he can go. He's got lower power traits. You see the length, you see the athleticism. So, like, again, I think the most ideal scenario would be he develops really well. They don't have to invest in tackle. They could let Braxton go, and he steps in as starter left tackle. That way you save the money people were you're going to spend on Braxton. You have Karan as a starter for cheap for 2 years, and then you invest your 10th overall pick somewhere else. I think that's the most ideal, but it is going to get more expensive for Chicago. We know this in 3 years after Caleb has to get paid. So you think of like, how can we like build this roster so that it's, again, we are competitive, but also that we're balanced. So I think that's interesting. And you talked about like why this draft is, important. I mean, you think of, not everyone has 2 early second round picks. And those are like, there's going to be guys that fall the first round, and the Bears have a chance to like get them. Like, think of last year, y'all. I was watching the draft and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm up here in Packerland. Okay, I live in Wisconsin. I was like, if the Packers get Cooper DeJean, like, I swear, like, because I love Cooper DeJean. He impacts the field multiple ways, and they needed a safety. And when I saw the Eagles trade in front of him, I was like, oh, please be Cooper DeJean. And it was. They picked him. I was like, thank goodness, But like, that could be the Bears. They could get those guys that fall, that have that value. So you think of like, how critical this could be for Poles and the team, but they could add like 3 really good players, much less 72 as well. And they also could play around and like, make small trade up, small trade downs, but I think they get 3 really good assets there. I just think they're going to be contributors this next year. I don't think that it's going to be a guy that's just going to sit on the bench.
And to me, when it comes to some of these draft picks, like you kind of hope that they start out by being valuable contributors, especially when there are some of these guys ahead of them. But okay, to me, part of the issue here though is also this: is it's just like, what do you do with the 2-2s? Part of me is also just like, if Ashton Genty's gone, so there's top 5 prospects for me, right? And in no particular order, but like Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, obviously not on my board, but Abdul Carter is. So is Travis Hunter. They're off the board too. So really, for me, with the Bears in the draft, it starts with Mason Graham, and then you've got Will Campbell as well, Kelvin Banks, Armand Membu, Ashton Genty's there too. But like, if any combination of those guys are off the board, and the Bears are sitting there between Tet McMillan / Tyler Warren or even Colson Loveland, and the other 4 guys I just mentioned are off the board, then to me the reality of it is that I look at this and I'm like, maybe the Bears trade down in round 1 because one of these quarterbacks starts to slip. Maybe they trade out of the first round entirely to get a better bang for their buck, which is matching the talent level with the valuation process, and say, all right, well, we're just going to ride this thing out with a couple acquired day picks in 2026 because they're going to need those because this team's getting more expensive. Plus, we're just going to make a couple second round picks here and get it out of the way because they have one right now. They have 2 right now. And if you trade back far enough, you should be able to land at least another second and another 4th, or in your 4th round pick that you lost last year in the Austin Booker trade.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. That's one thing that could happen because like if you move back, it could even be 2 trade backs, which like I know everyone wants to trade back, but if you get, let's say you get undervalue for it, right? Then I think it's more open that it could happen. Like I remember when Detroit traded up with Minnesota to get Jameson Williams, and people were like, "Wow, man, Minnesota didn't get what they wanted." They're like, "The market's the market. Like it's not always going to be what the draft value trade chart says it's going to be." So if they trade down, excuse me, like once, and then you're in like that late or in the 20s, then it's one of those teams like the Giants, the Browns. If they want to move up and get a Jackson Dart to get that 5th-year option value, then you could get actually more value there. So yeah, it could definitely happen a couple different ways. And I'm with you. I mean, I'd rather trade down. I've been team trade down would make me very happy with this class. Here's an interesting one I got for you though. I put this as a poll on Twitter. It's currently 51.3% versus 78.7%. Very close on 641 votes. Let's say Chicago trades up because we don't like this gap of guys that could be there, right? If you're saying those guys are gone, right? The guys that are quote unquote good or consensus good. So I said Chicago makes a small trade up, and then I put forget about the cost because I know people are going to be mad, but whatever cost is a trade up. Both Genty and Mason Graham are available. Which one do you take, Usayd?
You're probably going to hate me for this, dude, but in the context of the question you're asking, I take Mason Graham. And let me explain why. I take Mason Graham simply because when I look at the 2 options that I have, first off, it's worth noting I voted for Mason Graham, okay? But the reason I voted for Mason Graham is simply because to me, a good offensive coordinator and a good offensive-minded head coach should be able to get the most out of any running back, especially in this draft class where Genty's in a tier of his own, but some of these guys in tier 2 are really good players that have the potential to be really freaking good. But the reason I'm going Mason Graham is because I believe that when you have a deep rotation such as Javon plus Grady Jarrett plus Mason Graham, I mean, you are now generating interior pressure in a way that is forcing the defense to have to always account for the 3 tech on every single play. You are freeing up the 1 tech as well. And then you are also going ahead and you can get insanely freaky with this whole thing. And then you can go ahead and you can start running tons of twists and tons of, stunts. And I think that Mason Graham's going to open up the game for the linebackers a hell of a lot more.
I'm not mad at you because I don't think there's a wrong answer to this question. Because I'm like, both, yes, right? Like, there are things I wish I saw more from Mason Graham's game. I wish his arms were longer. Like, I get that one, but he's a good player. But the difference is defensive tackles that get paid is double what running backs get paid. So, like, that's the other part of, like, the positional value.
Yeah,
so, like, I think Genty's a better player. I don't even think it's close. I think in terms of pure talent, it goes Hunter, Carter, however order you want to have it. Then I think it's Genty in terms of overall talent in this class. And then the next tier down is like Graham, Campbell, whomever else that you want. And so, but then you add in the positional part, which is what people like with Campbell and Membu, etc. And so I get it. I don't think there's a wrong answer. I'm just going to say this, man, and like I need to stop. But like I keep watching all 22 of Genty, and I'm getting into like 2023. He's so special, man. And I'm not normally like this, but like, and then I watch like Caleb Johnson and Travion Henderson. And I'm just like, ugh, like I almost want them to take Genty just so I don't have to like be so negative to Bears Twitter about these other running backs that they're probably going to end up with.
So I think something has to be said here, right? If they don't land Genty, if the Bears don't land Genty, I mean, it's not the end of the world. Like, they're going to take a prospect that has a legitimate chance at being a stud and, quite frankly, being a game changer in the context of whatever's happening. But then the other part about this whole thing, I think, is this. It's just like, I look at some of this running back class, and it's like I said a couple of weeks ago, right? Like, Ashton Genty makes your entire offense better, okay? When we look at what a guy like a Travion Henderson is able to do, he's going to make solely your running game more explosive. Now, Genty's running back number one. There's not a single draft outlet out there or a media outlet out there that kind of thinks otherwise, unless you are Daniel Kelly, but whatever, we don't pay attention to him. But I also kind of look at this whole thing. I see you shaking your head there.
Well, he's a fake NFL scout, y'all. Who haven't researched.
Well, I mean, I had him on the show one time, so this is on Picks for Polls, probably dating back
the one that hates Caleb Williams.
Yeah, that one.
He was, from what I saw, was an admin assistant to a scout. That's what I've heard.
Well, I mean, close enough, right? Secretary, but yeah. So again, the point I think has to be made is this: is like if the Bears don't get Genty next week, or they pass up on Genty, it legitimately isn't the end of the world. But it's like we talked about a few weeks ago. The hard part about sitting there at number 10 overall is that you are not really in a good spot, because at that point you are in a position to where it's like you are basically banking on another team making a mistake so that one of the guys that's ranked within the top like 15 on your board falls to you. And I realistically look at it and I'm like, well, the Bears board for 10 is not going to be freaking huge because none of the quarterbacks are on there. Yeah, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are on there, but they're on there just as a freaking courtesy. Like, That's what this is. The realistic big board's like 4 to 5 guys.
Yeah. Well, but the other thing too, like with this stare is like running backs, like it's a deep class. D tackles, it's a deep class. So like you're going to get quality at 72, much less 39 and 41. The other thing with the running game too, y'all, is like, if you think of all of the things that factor into a good running game, play calling, that's automatically better in Chicago. Even if Ben Johnson isn't who we think he will be as a head coach, he's going to be better than the play calling we've had in Chicago at a minimum the last few years. O-line is a lot better. In fact, y'all, this is interesting. So Mike Clay from ESPN, he does analyzes different units, and this actually has changed recently. I talked about this on an earlier podcast, but so he looks at across the league, everyone's units. The Bears, he has it's upgraded. It's above the Lions in terms of O-line unit right now. They are one of the top 3 offensive lines in the NFL. That's with Braxton Jones at left tackle. And so I know Bear fans don't realize that, but like the running game will be better just because of that too. So Ben Johnson calling the plays, and the O-line being better will be better for Swift, for whomever. And then you factor in, okay, we're going to get another running back to complement Swift or a better running back potentially. And that's where you get your Bucky Irvings, your Tyrone Tracy's, your whomever. Rico Dowdle last year wasn't even a starter to start the year, and still ran for, I think, 1,000 yards. So you'll get guys that are effective that aren't the most talented players because everything else is set up for them. Like the floor is already raised in Chicago. I think Genty would just blow the roof off, but I think the floor is so high that even if they got a guy I'm not in love with, Caleb Johnson, for example, he would be very effective because of this scheme and how it's set up.
And this is a scheme to where things are... I mean, we'll have to talk more about the scheme once the draft is over and we can actually do a deep dive on some of these players. But it's just like, this is a scheme that's kind of built to hide the weaknesses of some of these players and really only pop out and, open the scheme up so people kind of see what the strengths of individual players really are. Now, to me, I also kind of look at this, should the Bears trade out of the first round? I mean, who are you realistically trading out with, right? Like, San Francisco has 11 draft picks, okay? You've got certain teams like Pittsburgh that I do think would make sense for the Bears to trade out with, but also part of it is that the Steelers probably are not moving from like 21 to 10, right? That just no way in hell that's happening. But like to your point about Genty, I mean, we've talked about this so many times over the years, you and I, how like the Bears have talent. They have potential, right? We see what this roster is doing. Can they go out and can they land that guy that is going to be the blue chip player that's not a quarterback but is going to help put this team over the top? Like the 2018 team was not necessarily missing that, but they just were a very young team. The 2019 team never really had that guy because that was the Buster Screen Cordarrelle Patterson offseason. And so the point I'm making is that you have to go ahead as a front office and say, who are we bringing in that's going to blow the roof off, but also be a blue chip player to help take us to the next level?
Yeah, well, and the other thing too is if they lit the entire draft class on fire, okay? The Bears don't draft anybody. The clock just runs out. Mike Clay has them as the 9th overall team right now. Like this team is so much better than how they've played, and I think we know that. And they're so talented even right now, y'all. Like kind of what you're speaking to, like the floor is raised everywhere right now in Chicago. Like I know we're going to get hype, and I feel like everyone's like, oh, offseason champs. Well, you can't be good in the regular season if the offseason was always bad. Like you're talking about like Buster Screen, etc. Like you have to have good offseasons to set up the actual good regular seasons. And the coaching is what takes the regular season to the next step. The GM can only give you the pieces. You have to put the pieces in a good place. So to me, like even without the draft class, this already going to be good. So that way, if they draft whomever, it's just going to continue to raise the bar. That's what makes it really exciting, I think, in Chicago right now. It's like you can see the pieces together, and the free agency really just made the draft a very wide open door for whatever they want to do.
Exactly. And to me, that is part of what's going to make it so interesting as we kind of progress through April here, then get into May. I mean, it's going to be fun when Ben Johnson is on the sideline and the headsets and stuff are going. He's calling plays like dub left, F stack, black 95, X clamp, Z shallow. That was a combination of 3 different plays that I called last year, by the way, because, have to kind of always put the play caller hat on, even though I will not be the play caller for this upcoming season. But that's okay. It is like, I'm excited, dude, to see what this team does, but I'm also, in the words of Jalen Johnson, hype don't win you games.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So like, it's like, I'm okay with it right now. Like, let's just let the hype happen because what did I hear out of Halas Hall? They said the excitement is, there's always some excitement, some hype, whatever, but everything seems like a real excitement. Like everyone knows what's going on. They're talking about Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson has this standard where he's always trying to make people uncomfortable, that they're always striving for a little bit more. It's like, ooh, this is like, I think special could be happening. And that's why it's like, I almost would rather them move up, man. I know this sounds crazy, and get Graham or Genty or Abdul Carter, whomever, to continue this special run and not just settle for whoever falls to 10 and be like, okay, we got I don't know. Shamar Stewart would be terrible. But anyways, like, whatever. And got one of these special players to continue this run of adding blue chip players.
And so we'll have to discuss some trade up, I guess, updated trade up, trade down scenarios in our next episode. Listen, people, draft's a week away. We are going to be doing 2 episodes prior to the draft, so keep us locked in to YouTube plus wherever you get your podcast. Stay locked in there. Wednesday night, we will have a live stream preview with myself, Nick, Zach Whalen. Oh my God. Zach Pearson and Steven Johnson. All right. And then we're also going to go ahead and have a few live shows throughout draft weekend. Nick and Steven are going to be going live a few times. Andrew and I will have a Picks for Polls episode as well. We just did our final mock drafts last night. That episode's out. Really keep it locked in here. Check out the Bear Report website as well. Join the boards, like, rate, subscribe, comment on YouTube, plus wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you guys next time, ladies and gentlemen, at Bear Down.